And I think hello. I see sending data. I don't know. It's never certain when the streams actually start. But hello, my name is Alan Leon. I'm the coordinator of the RPM Challenge, and this is Sunday afternoon for me. And yeah, I'm very excited to be presenting this workshop. It's one of a string of Sunday workshops co-presented with Lawnya Vawnya. Lawnya Vawnya, they come through every year. They make me look good. They make the RPM look good. like we have our shit together. But it's really them that has their shit together. And Sarah Harris is joining me from Lawnya Vawnya today. She's a big
What's
reason
up?
why.
How's it going?
So how was it you put these three workshops together, right? Was
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
yeah. How
Just
was it doing that?
emails,
Just flinging some emails
just
around.
flinging some emails. No, it was cool. Like, for example, Sarah worked for the festival last year
Right.
in person as a tech, and so naturally, it seemed cool to keep her involved.
Yeah. 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 I mean, keep it in the family, you know.
Just emails, chance happenings, friends. It's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's fun to ask people to do this too. It's like you know that they it gives another, like with Jacob's workshop last week. It was really cool, really cool. I've never like had an extended time where someone uh like that I love his music that is just goes through that process. It's really fun. Anyway. Um yeah, so we are a little behind. Sorry about that, but with hello to everybody in the chat. Um I think we're streaming. Yes. Oh, I see you there. Okay. And yeah, so if anybody during this workshop has any questions or comments, just put them in the chat, and Sarah or I will bring them to the workshop. And Sarah, I'm going to ask you to introduce our workshop host now.
For sure, yeah. So this is Sarah Shin. Maybe say hi, Sarah, so that you pop up.
Oh, hi.
I think you
Hey,
might have
how's
popped
it
up.
going? Did I pop up?
Yeah, you popped up.
Yeah. Yeah, so Sarah's an audio engineer, composer, multi-instrumentalist, electronic artist based in Montreal. Also a live sound tech on occasion. But you mostly do studio work, right?
It actually before the pandemic, I was doing mainly live sound stuff. But
Oh, okay.
now it's mainly studio work. Yes.
Okay, awesome. And you're into like more experimental music and stuff.
Yeah, with my own stuff, yes. But I like all sorts of music. Yeah.
All music. Okay, awesome. And
Sound.
yeah,
Just recorded
everything.
sound. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add to that, Sarah?
No, that's cool. That's fine. Uh, I'm good.
Cool. But yeah, this is Sarah Shin, and we're stoked to have her leading a mixing and mastering workshop today.
Cool. Did you want me to start then? Should we get into it?
Yeah, sure. We have a bunch of people watching on YouTube. Fog Machine, The Fence Sitters, Zella, Pizza Potamus, Pizza Potamus Studios,
That's the best.
Aaron Barry, Andrew Walsh, MGA. Hello, everybody watching. So yeah, take it away, Sarah. We'll be here.
Okay. So I'll start then. We shouldn't wait any more for people. Okay, cool. I'm gonna share my screen actually, if that's okay, because I have a little PowerPoint to help me keep on track of things. I encourage if you have a question to just interrupt me and I can answer it on the spot. If it requires a much longer answer, then perhaps I'll just move it to the end. But yeah, it's gonna be pretty chill, and let's get into it. Okay, let's share the screen here.
Yeah, if with the audio setup, maybe if you keep an eye on your text chat from us, then we can.
Yes. Okay. Of course. Yes. Please let me know if the audio is going a bit wonky. I apologize to everyone. I've done a few Zoom workshops before and guest lectures and stuff, but just the nature of Zoom, it kind of really degrades and there's a little glitchy audio. So there's a whole bunch of factors. It could be the internet, your internet, the Zoom. It's generally just the Zoom compression algorithm trying to optimize things, and that's just how it is. But if you have a question because you didn't hear something properly, just let me know. Okay, so sharing. Wait, let me stop that for a sec and start. Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm sharing my sound. Cool. Okay. So can you all see the PowerPoint I just started? It's all good. So welcome to Mixing and Mastering Essentials with me, Sarah Shin. I'm doing this on behalf of RPM and Lawnya Vawnya, whom I worked with at their festival as a live sound tech last year. And so I'm really happy to do this and work with them again. Okay, I'm just going to say a little bit about me, even though Sarah Harris did an amazing intro, just so that you're like, why are we listening to you and believe what you say? You don't have to, but I've been doing this for a little while. I started my music career actually in Korea. I used to live there for a few years, and I was a radio DJ, and I had a show that kind of was more music journalism and looking into the global trends in the independent music scenes of different countries. And I was also working as a musician and a B-rated mediocre voice actor. Yeah, it was fun. And then I moved to Montreal, where I did started doing recording, mixing, and mastering more so, and live sound and sound design. And you could see my IG and my website there. And then I'm just leading my best Gemini life and also trying to be a music producer, an electronic artist, and a composer. Because I'm actually, I think first and foremost, a electroacoustic composer is what I started as a long time ago. And so yeah, that's a shameless plug for that IG and websites. I'm gonna have up on my Sarah Shin Studio website this presentation for you to download later. I haven't touched my websites for like a long time, so give me like a day perhaps to put it up, because I don't even know what state they're in at the moment. I've just been a bit too busy to update them. Okay, so let's go into it. So mixing and mastering, you guys are interested into it. So what do you really need, or what do you really need? Honestly, you probably just need these two things to get into mixing and mastering and to be good at it. First and foremost, it's critical listening skills. I think since most of you are making music, you probably already have this and you don't realize it. You know, if you ever catch yourself kind of listening to a song and being like, I can kind of recreate this, you know, and all it consists of like this drum part and this guitar and this voice, like you're deconstructing the song in your head. That's critical listening. You're analyzing the song. Sometimes when I listen to a song I really like, I'm like, I don't know why I like it. I just know it's really powerful to me. And so I will deconstruct it more consciously. Like I will listen section by section and be like, okay, so this is the intro. Why do I like this? And like, this is the bridge and this is the chorus. Oh, the chorus is really powerful because maybe it goes into like a 4-part harmony that seems really big and loud. And that's why it's climactic. You know, that type of thinking is critical listening. And I think the more that you consciously do this every time you listen to music, the more you're actually honing your skills as a mixing and mastering engineer. And it's very important to make this a habit. And to be very honest, it can also enhance your listening experience and make the music more enjoyable, because you're like, oh, I kind of know how this is made. This is kind of cool. And so I encourage you to constantly go into listening with that intent in mind. and just see if it works out for you. Okay, and the second thing you need is a body of knowledge of music. So that's just basically saying you need listening experience. So if you are a human, I'm assuming, you guys are all around adult age or above, like you probably already have 18 years of listening experience under your belt or more. And so you meet these two criteria. The only thing I say that with this body of knowledge of music, or this, comprehensive compendium of music you have, you want to make it actually more comprehensive. You want to kind of explore genres of music that perhaps you don't even know about, or that you wouldn't naturally go to because you actually don't, it doesn't really resonate with you. You're not a huge fan of that type of music. Listen to it anyways. And you'll be very surprised. No matter, even if it's not an enjoyable experience, you will always come away with something that you don't realize that you will probably use later down the line. And so I think that's, another very important aspect to mixing and mastering. If you have these two fundamental mindsets, you're good to go. So anyone can mix and master, really. Oh yeah, I forgot I put this in. You also need like God-given patience, because okay, how modern music is made today, there's no way around it. You're going to have to teach yourself how to use software, at least, and probably some hardware as well. And it's not the most intuitive. You will get frustrated to the point where you want to like throw it all out the window. But that's part of the process. If you learn how to play a musical instrument, you just need the exact same type of resilience as that, if you have that type of patience and you can overcome the frustration, it gets less and less annoying each time and less frequent each time. Or if it comes up even as frequently, you can problem solve it a lot faster. And so troubleshooting technology is a huge part of being an audio engineer. Okay, so bear with me. I'm going to ask some very, I think just because everyone comes from a varied background, I was told for this. But you know what? It doesn't even matter if you're an expert as well. It's good to go through these first principles. These questions I'm going to ask are very simple sounding, but actually I do this because I've helped a lot of musicians with their mix just because they forgot about these first principles. And you're like, if you only kept these things in mind, you would kind of know how to fix these issues initially. So we'll just go through these really fast. What is sound? So sound is the vibration that propagates as an acoustic wave through a transmission medium, such as gas, liquid, or solid. So that just means there's a bunch of these particles that are kind of like stretching and compressing or through the air and coming into your ear. And that's basically sound. The motion is a lot like a slinky, hence that picture I put in here. So just like, I always just tell people, like, imagine that cute little slinky dog coming at you from a speaker. That's how sound works. So what is hearing? It's the reception of these slinky waves, into your ears, and then your brain translates it. So actually, it's very important to understand that sound is a sensation that is part physiological and part psychological. That you have to always keep in mind when you're mixing. Because what that means is everyone hears a little differently, and hearing can be honed. Okay. So what is then mixing? Mixing is combining all the sounds from a multi-track recording and kind of, manipulating their interrelationships to each other to form one nice cohesive song. Generally, the goal is to achieve a desired mix that can translate as consistently as possible, regardless of your listening condition, right? So as a result, I think it's very important to have a reliable, well-known listening system. And so so when I say reliable, well-known listening system, I don't mean it has to be expensive. Sorry, excuse me. I just I have a bit of a cold. So I might cough sometimes. Sorry about that. Where was I? Yes, a well-known listening system. And that does not mean it has to be expensive. Yes, that's what I was saying. Okay. And so like, all of us we don't necessarily have like the most well decked out treated room with really expensive speakers. Most people don't have that. And even those people who do have that, there's no system that's perfect. When I say a well-known listening system is you are very familiar with it, how things sound on it, and the weaknesses of your system. So for instance, when I started doing mixing and mastering, I had these, pretty non-expensive bookshelf speakers in a creaky old Montreal apartment that I tried to treat with a bunch of curtains and stuff. But I knew it really well. And because I was mixing so much in there. But I also knew that anything below 300 hertz was just not as accurate as I'd like it to be. Like I just didn't have a bass system, couldn't afford a subwoofer, and my neighbors would kill me if I even had one anyways. So I would mix it to the best of my ability, and then I would just like run to where I knew the bass was more accurate, or I would even listen to it in a hyped bass situation, like cars hype up the bass all the time, or you know, Dr. Beats headphones or something like that. They have hype basses and things like that. So a way to get around from having a multimillionaire studio is check on many different systems. Check on crappy laptop speakers, on Bluetooth headphones, and on medium to good headphones, whatever you can get your hands on. And if your music is sounding, relatively close to how you'd want it to sound on all those systems, then you got a good mix. That's basically it. So it's always, good to also constantly hone your critical analytical listening skills to help you, understand what each system is doing and how it's reacting to your mix. Okay. Okay. Mixing essentials. This is, I think, if anything you take away from this little workshop today, it's probably these three things. I think if you have these three things in your head, you are guaranteed to get a good mix, hands down. It might seem obvious at first, but again, I've had a lot of artists come to me being like, I don't understand what's wrong with this mix. And I think they're just kind of just going into a mix without kind of having any goals or intentions or clearing out their head first. And they're just kind of like fiddling with faders and knobs, not really knowing where they're going. But I think if you go into a mix intentionally with if you're mixing with these three things in mind, you should be good to go. Okay. So number one is balance. It can refer to intensity balance, which is the loudness, which you control with faders. And then there's tonal balance, which is, along the frequency spectrum. So, how is my bass in comparison to my hi-hat and cymbals? Like, is it having the right proportion to each other? Is my bass too loud, too soft? Things like that. Space. So that refers to your stereo field, which you control through panning generally. It's like left, right, and center. And, generally, I like to think of the space more so in a 3D space. There's a lot more advanced. This is more of a modern way of thinking in terms of mixing, is the 3D space aspect. There's a lot more advanced processors out there, just because the VR world has come out and stuff, and it's kind of fun to think of music as something that's more immersive. And so that's how I like to mix my music. It does depend, on your artistic goals. If you want to sound more vintage and stuff like from the 70s, you're probably going to treat your music more like in a stereo field type way. I remember I was actually mixing a jazz album last week, and I kind of put the piano that spanned the whole stereo field, where the lower end would play on the left and then the higher stuff, progressively gets more to the right. And if you translate that to like real life, that means like the piano is like a gargantuan elephant piano that is 10 times larger than every other instrument. And the jazz artist did not want that. And I thought it was cool, but he was like, I was kind of going for more like a clean vintage feel with jazz, but with the modern aspects. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I had to use my stereo field to narrow down the piano to make it more realistic, as if you're actually watching a concert instead. So space can do a lot of cool things. And lastly, there's character and style. Yeah, and that just refers to your artistic vision. So if you're not mixing your own music and you're doing it for another artist, it's very important to have good communication. And that's where your compendium knowledge of listening experience comes into play, so that you can communicate, like, is it kind of like this type of music or this type of artist or this type of song, and that helps a lot. Yeah, and that's just your mood and your aesthetic. So for mixing, there are a few key tools that we'll go over. And they are EQs, compressors, reverb, and FX processors. Just due to time constraints, we actually won't go over reverbs and FX processors, because I think they're pretty straightforward and there's just so many different types you can do. I think most of you can figure it out on your own when you open up a reverb and just play around with it. It's like a very cause and effect type thing. You'll see what happens. It doesn't really need too much explaining. And same with FX processors. If you get something that's a distortion thing, and you can just twist the knob and see what happens. I think the two most important and most commonly used tools are, unfortunately, also the most misunderstood tools sometimes, and perhaps misused. And those are EQs and compressors. So that's what I'm going to kind of explain, and then show you in a demo how they can be useful. Like, yeah, so let's just do it. Equalization, EQs. They help the tonal balance. Basically, you are trying to generally carve out a frequency domain for your particular instrument to reside in, and that they don't really clash with other instruments and other frequency domains, kind of. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. And they can emphasize, mitigate, or eliminate frequencies of a sound, like the lows, mids, and highs. And analog EQs or their emulations can give coloration. So all those pictures you see on the right, they're all different types of old analog EQs, and people use them because when sound goes through electronics, and depending on the circuitry, it will give a certain signature texture or coloration to the sound, and that's why people like using specific types of those EQs. They'll give a specific type of curve, even EQ curve, that you can only get if it goes through that circuitry. And so, yeah, and that's basically it. Okay, compression. Compression, I think, is the one thing that is probably misused the most, but it's also the one thing, when it's used well, it's kind of the difference between a song that sounds really amateur and pro. It's often how they use the compression, or if they have compression. And so, again, I think once you learn how compression works, you're gold. Compression doesn't naturally come necessarily intuitively, so it's okay if you don't necessarily understand it comprehensively all at first. But I think it's good to practice. If you go into a mix and you bring up a compressor, what I recommend that you do first is you intentionally change the variables, knowing what that variable does, and then listen. And once you have all your variables set to something you like, then you can like save that slap on a preset and then compare. And you'll often find that your settings are way better than the preset. And if they're not, that means you need more practice with compression. But and the more you do this, the faster and the easier it gets. And then it becomes second nature and you don't even think about it anymore. And it doesn't become such a hard concept. If compression is not a hard concept for you, then that's good. Some people get it right away and some people don't. So I didn't get it right away, which is why I'm saying this. So anyways, okay, let's get into it. Compression basically, it essentially reduces the dynamic range. Dynamic range is the span between your most quiet sound to your loudest. So like on here, it's like this in the waveform that's uncompressed, the smallest part is the quietest part, and the peaks here are the loudest parts. And then in this very exaggerated compressed waveform here, you'll see that the loudest part is here, and then the smallest part is very close to it. The dynamic range has been really reduced with the compression to the point where we always joke that it looks like a sausage. Like, did you sausage your tracks is what we'll say. And yeah, basically it's used so that we get better consistency with respect to intensity levels. And it should be used to get rid of excessive dynamics. It also has a whole bunch of other purposes depending on the compressor you're using. It can enhance your tone or groove. It can make things punchier, thicker. Some of them even have distortion. So they can be kind of like a Swiss Army knife in that way. What's really important, and I think is really useful, it's used to glue a mix. So if you put one of these guys on a bus, which I'll show you later in the example, what I mean, not like a literal bus, but a bus in your mixing session, it will glue it together. Right. And by essentially reducing the dynamic range, you're actually making the overall loudness levels of what you're compressing less. So you could actually, increase the overall mix. You're giving yourself more headroom so you can make everything louder, basically. So caution, over compression can squeeze the life out of your music, and then you'll be like that little character that I put up there. Okay. Okay, we'll quickly go over the variables of compression, and then we'll go right into a demo. And yeah, it'll be a little bit more exciting than just me talking. Okay. So compression, there is threshold and ratio. Threshold is the level at which the compression is engaged, and the ratio is the amount of compression that is applied to the signal. So you'll see here, for instance, let's say my threshold, I set it at negative 16 dB. Anything louder than negative 16 dB will be compressed. And how much will it be compressed by? That depends on my ratio. If my ratio is 2:1, then the signal will be, so for instance, the threshold is negative 16. Let's say I have a signal that peaks at negative 14. That's 2 dB higher than my threshold. My ratio is 2:1. It will compress it down by 1 dB, right? The signal is 2:1, attenuation is 1. Yeah. You don't really have to know the exact math. Just use your ears. Just set it to something and listen to see if it sounds good. But it's good to know the theory behind this, because you'll start to know, how different ratios actually start to sound. Okay, and right. So there's attack time, release time, makeup gain. The attack time is the time it takes to become fully compressed after exceeding the threshold. Release time it takes for a signal to go back to the original state. And the makeup gain is to make up for the fact that you've kind of made the overall sound attenuated. So here is kind of a good little diagram. This is your original signal, and then this is the threshold. So all these peaks up here has to be compressed. And this is the compressor gain curve. This is the, oh, sorry, pointing on the wrong screen. This is the attack time. It takes to get fully compressed. It's compressed for a while, and then there's this release time. I forgot to say, like, if you have like quick release times, that's going to give you like, that pumping effect that you get. It can be, it's not good if you want your thing to sound natural, but some people do it on purpose, like a lot of pop or dance tracks, to get like, like a pumping groove effect and get you all excited. And so, yeah, anyways, back to this, you'll see the output signal results in something that looks like this. And look at the shape here. It's a lot different than the original one. You're essentially giving it an envelope, shape. And so compression can really affect your sound. And also note that overall the loudness is less than the original. Okay. So mixing example. I'm just going to pause this for a sec. This is my friend Mason. I made 3 music videos with him last year. Very cool artist. Just finished the Banff residency, I think. And yeah, he's a drummer that I mean, you'll see. He's a drummer that's he's an electronic artist where he has these sensors on his drums, and they trigger these modular synths that he has, and he gets some really cool experimental results. And just because I had, all the stems from his recording, he was very nice to let me show you his work. So check him out. I put his IG and his website there. I'm just gonna kind of actually skip to the middle of the video just to play like maybe 10 seconds. It's a good video because you could actually see the recording setup that I did. It's a ton of mics basically, but drums are always kind of quite tricky to do. And so we'll go over a bit of that. Let's see, let's try here. Yeah, so I hope that didn't sound too nasty on Zoom for you. If you want to hear like a higher quality, you can just like YouTube his stuff and it'll go. Okay, I'm gonna leave this share screen and we're gonna switch to a Pro Tools session, and I'll show you how I kind of used EQ and stuff to do that. Did I stop the share? Okay. Right. Now I'm gonna, okay. So Zoom is being a little bit of temperamental, and when I'm gonna turn on a Zoom aspect that's like makes your music sound great. It doesn't, but it makes it marginally better. So I'm going to try to use it. But when I do this, the music will sound a little bit better, but my voice will probably go to the left for some reason for you guys. I hope that's not too annoying. If you can't hear something that I say, please just ask me and I'll repeat it. But I think it's probably worth it for the marginal, perhaps probable difference that that will happen with this original sound for musicians Zoom gimmick. But yeah. Sorry, excuse me. Again, I have a little bit of a cold. Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Do this. Sorry, I also have a bad habit when I'm doing things on the computer. I start singing to myself. It is horrible. And also when I'm nervous, I do it, which is such a bad counter reaction to nervousness. Okay, we're gonna share desktop 2. Yeah, let's do this. Awesome. You can see my cool tiger background. Where is my Pro Tools? Pro Tools, yeah, here we go. All right. Okay. So this is the Pro Tools session for that song. First and foremost, organization. If you have an audio engineering friend who seems anal retentive, it is for a reason. Organization is our life. We're probably like really super messy in every other aspect of life because all the energy goes into like organizing these type of things. It will save you. It will help you make a better mix. So I highly recommend. This is a session that required a lot of organization because I had like millions of mics on this dude. And what I recommend is you lay out your tracks, you label them, you save your session with the date, kind of make a history tree for yourself, Every time you make a major change and you like it, save it and then make a new version and work on that. It doesn't use up a lot of space making new versions for things. So how I organized this was I organized them in groups because I have several several mics per instrument. I'm using Pro Tools here. You don't need to use Pro Tools. I think I wrote my first song like on Audacity or something like that. And it was great. Still holds up to this day. Ableton's fine. Logic's fine. Whatever you can use. GarageBand is fine. They're all basically the same. Audacity and GarageBand they don't have as much, they're not a professional DAW. They're not even actually DAW. They're more like sound editors. But it doesn't mean you can't mix and get a good song from it. So you do Fruity Loops or whatever that's called. I used to use that for when I compose for video games. It's all good. So anything I say here, just because it's on Pro Tools, there's usually an equivalent with whatever software you're using. They're all the same. Okay, so this is organized by instruments and I put them in groups. So if I just open up this drum folder, boom, look at all the drum mics I have. In Ableton it's called groups, I think, and in Logic I think it's called stacks. Very useful. I have all these synth mics, and then I have all these reamp mics. Reamp mics means what we decided to do, because we were a bit experimental, and we actually recorded everything first, and then we edited it all together, and then we played it back into the room through these vintage guitar amps, and we're like, let's mix this into with the original. And that's a creative routing thing. It adds a really cool texture, and we were really happy with the results. But as a result, I have like twice as many mics now, and I kind of went a little bonkers. Again, you need organization skills. So I'll just close that to keep our sanity. And then there's room mics. You'll see that I have like 3 different reverbs here that I'm using to create a cool space. I talked to the artist. He really wanted it to have kind of an ethereal, airy feel for the synths, like as if they were floating above the drums. And he's like drumming and like beating and trying to get up there in a way, but can't really get there. That I like that type of discussion because it really helps me figure out how am I going to mix this. Again, mixing is technical, but it's a technical art. It's something where you use the technicality to be creative, right? And so, yeah. And then I have a master track here. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to use EQ first, I think. You'll see that I actually don't have a lot of processing on this mix because the recording was so good, not to toot my own horn, but it's like it was a really good recording. And so, that's the point. You don't actually want to if you have you want to get it as close to what's in your head as possible from the get-go. So if you can get a good recording, that's awesome. It's less work in the mix. And then if your mix is great, it's less work in the mastering stage. I always just say try to get the best recording each time. So I didn't have to do as much work. In fact, you'll see that mainly all of my tracks, they only have like an EQ on them, and that's it. It's like, that's it. Some of these tracks look like they don't even have any processing. There's a lot of YouTube guys out there who are like put an EQ and a compressor on every track. You don't have to, right? You really don't. In fact, I recommend that you don't. Listen to it first and be like, does this need altering? If it doesn't, just let it go, because every time you process something, there's a higher probability that you're messing up, you're creating new phase issues, you're degrading the sound, you're doing some type of processing to it that will have an effect with another relationship that might, you'll have to think about. Everything's interrelated. I think that, again, what was that joke? If it's not Baroque, don't fix it, like, what was that? Yeah. It's cool. I stand by that joke. Beauty and the Beast, y'all. It was a great movie. Okay, let's get to it. EQ. I'm talking too long. I'm sorry. I get rambly. Drum track. Let's listen to a bit of it and hopefully it will sound good. Let's try from here. Let me know if it's too loud or too soft and I can turn it up. Sound okay to you guys? Yeah? Okay. So, on my end, because I can hear the high fidelity version, like, these are great drums. I hope it came out that way for you guys. Let's take a look at this kick mics. Everything that's pink here are my kick mics. I actually only have 2 mics, and then I actually routed them through an analog compressor, and I recorded that in parallel. I was doing parallel compression with the kick mics. For those of you that are a little bit more advanced. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. It's not important. Let's look at the kick-in mic, and you'll see this wonky-looking EQ curve. So let's see what I was doing here. I think to explain my thought process, again, if you don't hear the differences, it's Zoom's fault, so I have to explain why I'm doing certain things out loud, as opposed to just showing and playing with you, because in my past experience, I wouldn't explain anything. I would just play it. Like, can you hear the difference? And no one's like, no, we can't. So I'm just going to say it out loud. I think what I was doing here is the kick drum. I think I'm trying to enhance and give it more meat. Like, I'm enhancing. It's probably like the fundamental frequencies of this kick. And then I'm like, kind of carving out, leaving room for, the other instruments here, because the kick kind of resides around here. Honestly, I'm surprised I have a shelf. Usually I put, what do you call it? A low pass filter or a high cut here. And I think you see that I tried, but I guess I didn't like the sound of it. Sometimes when you carve a sound too much, like let's say I did this and I only had the kick, it might sound, this might sound too dark. It might sound too unnatural. It might sound too discreet. Like if you put, you really carve out an EQ space trying to create a tonal balance, suddenly all these instruments are existing too separate. So it's nice to have a little bit of bleed from the instruments in it, These are just little tips that are coming to my mind. But let's play it and listen. Let's see. Let's go back to 3. Yeah, let's just solo that. And let's put that in there. Yeah, I think I wanted some bleed in there, and that's why I left it. Okay. You can't really tell anything when you solo it. It's good to identify if you're looking for a specific frequency and stuff, it's good to solo it to get it. But hands down, you're always going to have to put it back in context. Otherwise, there's no point. You have to hear it in the whole mix. Otherwise, you don't know. So you're going to always solo it and unsolo it, right? So that sounds horrible. That's why I didn't do it. So I think one of the key things to do that you'll find with mixing, no matter what you're doing, A being is going to be the norm. You're going to always A, B, A, and B. Is it better? Is it worse? Is it better? Is it worse? It's kind of like when you go to the optometrist and like they're putting the different lenses on your eyes. You know, it's like -1 or -2, like better or worse, better or worse. And you're like, I don't know, which is more clear. It's the same. You're going to be doing it over and over again. I always have like this weird, like, you know, that optometrist voice in my head when I do it. And I'm like cracking myself up in my head. It's always weird. Okay. So you'll find that in these plugins, there's like usually an A/B function, like you see up here. And, you know, you can change something, copy it, and then change it back. And then, yeah, you can always just like A, B, A, B, A, B. You're going to be doing that after every change to see, is it better? Is it worse? Okay. Let's take another example, just so that we get the EQ down. Example. So, wow, look at this wonky snare EQ. Yeah, let's do this snare. How many mics do I have on this snare? Oh, I did the same thing. I did the same thing as a kick. I had a top and a bottom mic on the snare, and yeah, and a compressor going through all of it. Hot tip, if you're doing drums or anything, but especially drums, I did this during the recording, so that's when I made this decision. But sometimes if you're not the person who recorded it and you're doing it and you're mixing it, put something that can flip the polarity on each track and test how that sounds. So like for instance, you'll see on the overheads here, I have something called a trim. It has a little polarity flip here. All that means is it's flipping the phase of that mic. You don't scientifically have to know what that means exactly, but it changes the relationship of that mic with the other mics. And it's usually quite noticeable, or at least a little bit noticeable. One will sound kind of more subdued than the other, and that means there's some phase cancellation issues going on. And so you want to choose, when you have a lot of mics that are close to each other, there's going to be phase issues. So you want to choose which polarity you want for each mic, and it will make all the difference. Sometimes you're like, why does my snare suck? And all you had to do is just flip the phase. So that is something I recommend you try when you're doing, especially drums, but you know, it could be done for a lot of different things if you suspect phase issues. Okay, sorry, that was a side note. Back to this wonky snare EQ. Where did it go? Here we go. I think what I was doing here, honestly, I could have probably also done a low pass here. Oh, I see why I didn't do it, because it brings down that little hump there. Okay, never mind. I think what I'm doing here is I'm bringing out like a meatier snare. It probably has a bit of meat down in this low end. I'm giving it a little bit more thump, I think is what I wanted. And up here, I like the snap of the snare. I need a little bit more of the snap, which probably, you know, it's always in the 4.2K area, 4.7K. And so that's where I found it. And then I'm carving out space for, like, I don't know, guitars, synths, whatever to exist here. Let's just solo and hear how it sounds. I'm going to turn it off. Yeah, I can, on my end, I can hear the definite difference. I'm not sure, again, with the zoom. Apologize if you can't. One more note. I'm using this plugin to show you, like, it's very nice visually. Like, you see the frequency and stuff. But when I am A and Bing, I'm actually closing my eyes. This is very, very important. And this is where that fundamental knowledge of knowing that sound is perceived as opposed to being an objective thing in your brain is important, because that graphic there is going to bias you, and also what you see is not proportional to how it's perceived. We don't hear on a one-to-one with that graphic, right? It's not proportional. We don't hear linearly, and there's no correlation between the graphics on these spectrums and these plugins. I mean, there could be a mathematical relationship, but our brain doesn't translate it. Like that's not how we interpret it. So we need to, I think in the end, with all these advanced tools and stuff, your ears are actually the most reliable thing. So you have to train them, and you have to just close your eyes and just go with your judgment. Yeah, that's very important. Don't A and B and watch. Use these tools as a check and to help you locate things, but that's it. Okay. Cool. And I'm trying to find an EQ where I was. Ooh, okay. Last EQ, I promise, because this is I'm using it for a different reason. I'm using it because there's some nasty resonance going on in these overheads, so we can solo this and just hear. Okay, so it's like the if you can hear that, it's like there's a resonance that's bugging me. So let me put on the plugin, and I'll turn it on while it's playing, and maybe you can hear the difference. So much better. Yeah, so much. That's really noticeable. I hope that's noticeable on Zoom. That is a very clear example of like a resonance being surgically cut out with that notch at like 138 hertz. Very useful. Like to me, that was day and night. I'm like so much better without. So EQ is very powerful. Sometimes that's all you need to mix a song is just EQ if you have a good recording, as is this case. Okay, now I'm gonna quickly show how are we for time? Okay. I'm going to quickly show a compressor, and then we'll go into mastering and then questions. I have a mastering example too, but depends on how much time you guys are limited to. But okay, so this is on the drum bus, a compressor. And this is one of my favorite compressors. The studio that I work at actually has the actual analog compressors. I love it so much that I bought the UAD emulation of it. By the way, again, I have to emphasize, you can use the stock plugins. That's fine. I'm just showing you this because it's fun. It's fun to see new toys and, just to show you what's out there, eventually. Like I didn't own any of the stuff for years. I was just working with stock stuff forever. And sometimes, stock is fine. Like I'll use it for certain things. So, but these analog emulations are just a fun go of it. So I really like this Neve 33609 compressor. It's one of my favorites. You'll see that my ratio, so it has all the stuff we just talked about. There's a threshold. There's the recovery time or the release time. There's the gain. There is the ratio. You'll see my ratio is only 1.5 to 1. I'm not using it very drastically. So what I suspect is, I did mix this last year, which is why I'm thinking like, what was I doing? I'm trying to trace back my steps, but I'm using a 1.5 to 1 ratio. I'm probably using this as, something to kind of give the bus a bit of glue, to make all the drums now, all these, because there's so many drum mics, I need to make it all sound kind of, I need it to breathe together. I need it to glue together to make it sound coherent and kind of groove together. That's very important for drums. So let us see how that sounds. All right. Should I do it with the compressor? I'm going to turn it on halfway through and we'll see if there's a difference. Okay, maybe just one more time. Maybe I'll turn it up a little bit louder so you can hear. Just 3 dB louder, just to see. Yeah. it's subtle, but to me it's it gives life. Like you hear it's brighter, it's a little bit more defined, it's pumping. Actually, the elements themselves are a little bit more defined, and it's more coherent. Again, if you can't hear it, I think it's probably it does take practice listening to this type of stuff too, but it's also it's not your fault more so, it's the Zoom's fault. So just come visit me in Montreal and I'll show you again. It's good. My place is small, but we'll all fit in here and have a merry time. Um, but yeah. So again, this mix was pretty easy. I did a lot of EQ. Um, on the bass, I did a bit of saturation, which you can explore for yourself. That's always fun. They'll just add harmonics and texture, and that's basically it. Um, and that's what I do a lot of the times. I think on the what was this? I have an imager to make the rooms seem more airy. Yeah, and that's it. So that's how I mix that song. Let me stop sharing my screen and we can quickly hit up. Should I answer questions of mixing first or should I hit up mastering? Do you guys have a pref? Okay, let's just get the show on the road. I'm just gonna quickly breeze through mastering because everyone's like, "What is this voodoo art?" And I'm always like, "I don't know." Okay, let me talk to myself again as I find my PowerPoint. Yeah, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Share screen. Share screen. Okay. Cool. Share screen with sound. Oh shit! I'm gonna turn off so my voice doesn't annoy the. Sorry, I shouldn't be swearing. Annoy the hell out of you guys. Um, there. Is my voice better? Ooh.
Doesn't matter.
Ooh.
Yeah, it does. No, yeah. Actually, I checked the stream and it's normal on the stream. It's all
What?
it's on both channels. Yeah,
It's just us.
yeah. It's just us.
Zoom be playing tricks on us.
Yeah.
Damn.
Anyway, that it sounded amazing. And man, how many microphones did you have for that setup?
Oh, I don't know. I think I had like 24 inputs at least. Not all of them were microphones. Some of them were DIs, probably from a synth. But yeah, at least it was at least 24, if not more. And then you
Wow.
double it because we reamped everything and recorded it through the room. So it was like
Right.
40 some tracks. Again, organization. I've worked with a lot more though. That was one guy, right? I've had like, ensembles,
Mhm.
orchestras. That's just the drums. It's very normal to go kind of all out on the drums, and then you're too tired to mic anyone else properly. But yeah. It's
Drums are the most important anyway.
yeah. Screw everything else. But I love drums, so I can't complain. It's always a pleasure to do drums. I always jump at the moment, but it's also kind of stressful sometimes. But okay, I'm going to share screen. Here we go. Sorry about this, guys. I'm not the most savvy on Zoom. Because I was an audio engineer, I didn't have to use it a lot during the pandemic. At least not well. Okay. Let's go back to this example. Okay. So, what is mastering? Generally, it's the final stage of audio production on your music. You apply the finishing touches. It enhances the overall sound. Okay, so this is where it starts to really differ from mixing. It's if it's an album, you're considering the consistency across the album, with respect to your aesthetic, with respect to your balances. Whereas in a song when you're mixing, you're considering the balances between instruments and tracks. Now you're considering that between songs, the overall flow, the relationship between the songs. Generally, you're looking at the larger picture. Also, it's really good because sometimes it's always good to have more people checking out your work. You will correct imbalances or undesired artifacts that were kind of missed by the artist or the mixing engineer, because the artist and the mixing engineer have just been listening to it so much. They kind of get it. Again, it's sound is part psychological. It becomes normalized in their brain. And so, sometimes these abnormalities or these distracting sounds, they just suddenly their brain doesn't register anymore because they've just been listening to the music all the time. Or there's something called like demo-itis, where the artist can't let go of their demo because they've heard it so much that they start to really just love it and nothing else. So it's good to have a mastering engineer to catch those things. Very important, a mastering engineer is getting the right loudness. Loudness is everything. If your loudness is accidentally messed up in the mastering stage, it can be frustrating because you've just spent 3 years making this album or however long, and it doesn't translate well through online or something because you got the loudness wrong. So we'll quickly go over that as well. And yeah, it will prepare for distribution, whether it's going to be on vinyl, CD, online, tape cassette, megaphone, whatever, prepares it for distribution. Okay, so what are the toolboxes? Sorry, not what are the toolboxes, what are the tools? Sorry, I can't speak today. I was just looking at that Mastercraft toolbox. It's like from Canadian Tire. It's great. So there's EQs, compressors, harmonic exciters, saturators, limiters, maximizers, meters, and dither. Again, EQs and compressors, like I said, the most important thing. If you understand EQs and compressors, boom, you're good to go. The rest is like just cherry on the cake. Harmonic exciters and saturators, that's going to give you, that extra little texture, polish, depending on your artistic, vision. Limiters and maximizers, we'll deal with. It gets to the point where you start to get into like this. You have to kind of be strategic about your gain staging to get the optimal loudness. Optimal being the keyword here, and to help you do that, you're going to use a bunch of meters to confirm what you're perceiving. And dither, we don't really need to get into dither. I forgot to add one more on there, metadata. But dither is if you recorded at 24-bit or 32-bit, which is your resolution in music, you're probably going to create a master that's 16-bit because that's what CDs are played at. If you're making a CD, a lot of online distribution will ask for a 16-bit master. They call it CD quality. And you have to use dither to do that. And Pro Tools doesn't let you choose the dither algorithm, so problem solved. Like, you just have to do what Pro Tools does. But if you're on Ableton or Logic, you can choose your dither algorithm, and so that's just something to be aware of. It's not a big deal. You don't have to fret over it, and we won't really go over it past that. In general, the changes are more subtle and on a smaller scale in mastering. You should not be making huge brush strokes or changes in the mastering stage. If you are, you might be needing to go back to the mixing stage. And so the mastering stage is for enhancing and polishing. Oh yes, to just go back, I forgot to add one more thing, metadata. That's, a new age thing where you have to like, basically I'm going to say a bunch of acronyms that may or may not matter to you, but you're basically injecting like ISRC, which is your ID tag on your song. So it can be recognized, when it's online or when it's like ripped from a CD, although no one really does that anymore. It's the identification tag is embedded in the digital data so that, all the information, the album art, the artist, the composer and stuff pops up. Funny enough, they don't have a field for audio engineer, which I'm not bitter about, but they should really have one on there because we spend a lot of time and care into this as well. But anyways, that's another debate. Yeah, cool. I think that's it. One more slide. So let's go over a mastering example. Last year, I mastered a Newfoundland artist named Sarah Hansen. You might know her. She did a great job. I really like the album. It's called Gather Up Your Days. That's her info. Check it out. That's her IG. That's her website. And so let's open up her album and see how that was done. Okay. I'm going to turn on my voice again, I guess, which will only annoy Elling. Sorry, yelling. Here we go. And Sarah Hansen. Sorry, it's just taking a quick sec to load up the tracks. And here we go. Cool. Desktop. Share sound. 2. Here we go again. Okay. Let me maximize this for you guys. Okay. Excuse me. Sorry. Every time I cough like that, I think I'm like, want to do one of those like plays where you're dying from like consumption or tuberculosis or whatever. Excuse me. Sorry. So sick. Okay. Here we go. We have different songs, all the songs on the album lined up here. From 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You'll notice that each song is on a separate track. So the very first thing when I get the mixes, which I got from an engineer, a great Newfoundland engineer called Michelle Lacour. We often tag team projects. She's usually the mix engineer. I'm usually the master. Sometimes it's reversed, but usually not. And I like it because I know she does an excellent job, and we work well together in knowing how we both kind of like treat things. Yeah, so it's good if you can have a good relationship with your mixing engineer if you're a mastering engineer. It's actually kind of important. I recommend it. I actually recommend it to the artists to have a team that knows each other. So the first thing I do is I line up all the songs like I just showed you, and then I listen to them. As I'm listening through the album once through, I'm generally kind of adjusting the space between the songs to see the flow and if it breathes, if it's enough space, if it needs more space, if it's too much space. That's like the general flow. And then I'll mark where I want each song to start as well. You'll see all these lines you see here that I've marked. I'm marking up the sections of a song. So not everyone does this. I mean, it depends. So mastering and mixing, it's very subjective. I gotta say, what I do is not, it's just what makes sense to me. It's not necessarily what everyone does, and you can do what makes sense to you. There's no hard rules, and anyone says that there's a hard rule to something in this art, that means that they're probably either very hard to get along with, or they don't know what they're talking about, or both, or they have a set way and they think they're right. They might be a bit opinionated, but all these rules that I'm saying, they can be broken. This is what I do. I mark up each section of the song. I am doing it because I know that I'm going to check each of these sections. Usually these sections are kind of like homogenous in the type of sound that they have. So like, it'd be like a verse or chorus. Usually I'm marking up where there's a transitional change or something, or an instrument comes in that I need to check, because every time I every time I change the master in a significant way, I want to check that section over again to make sure that it's affected in a way that is desirable. So, mastering, it can seem tedious at first, but you really get to know the song. You're looping over and over again sections of the song after every significant change. That's very important. Because, when you slap, a preset on and just like call it a day, it's going to ruin your music. And that's if you remember, this is the last stage of your music. So anything you do here is permanent and published for life. So the stakes are high, a little bit higher, not that high. It's music. No one will die. We're not doing surgery here, so it's okay. Okay. So let's look at the third song, and then I'll shut up and answer questions if there's time. Basically what I do is I have the original track, 2-track I got from Michelle right here. This is the original mix. I will duplicate it, and then I will start to affect the duplicate just so that I can A-B back between them every time I make a change. I'll just A, B, A, and B, A, and B. It's gonna become your 2 favorite letters or hated letters, however you want to see that. And yeah, that's basically it. I'll just go through this chain that I did on it, and then we'll be good. So let's take a listen first to the original. Maybe somewhere in the middle here.
Sometimes I'm shameless, sinful and aimless, measure it all against me. Blistered and worn, troubled and torn, and nobody's baby.
Awesome. Loved it. First thing that comes to mind, a whole bunch of other artists I can use for my reference tracks. This is very important. This is why having listening experience is important, because one, it makes things easier finding reference tracks, and two, you can, decide on stylistic choices that you want. Also, but you always take priority the stylistic choices. I always ask the artists, like, do you have reference tracks? It's okay to ask them that. Sarah Hansen, I think, told Michelle, who told me that we were kind of going for a Joni Mitchell, Court and Spark feel here. I was like, awesome. You know what I did? Imported that straight into here as a reference track. I won't play it because copyright, and then they'll take down this video. But, and I actually like having several reference tracks because I know that the artist doesn't want to be a complete imitation of that. That's not the point. The point is there's aspects about that and a general feel that we want to capture in theirs. And so when I heard Sarah Hansen's voice, I was like, oh, this sounds a lot like Gillian Welch on the Revelator album. Excellent album. Check it out if you don't know it. I was like, specifically April the 14th, part 1. Excellent song. Check it out. I would play it for you here, but, again. And also, I think Sarah sings with
Run out of time.
right, that duet right there. Again, I thought of Gillian Welch and what's his name, David Rawlings. I was like, excellent. I can use that as a balance reference between the two. I also thought her delivery of her voice sounded a lot as if a little bit like Amy Mann as well, if you're familiar. Amy Mann's style of music is different, but I still imported one of the songs of Amy Mann because I wanted to see how that vocal is in relationship to other instruments, because it's not necessarily the most belting vocal, so like it's tricky to balance the softer voices a bit more. And I think I was searching through Amy Mann, and I was like, oh, I can't really use these for references. The style is just too different. And then I found something where I just liked the bass to vocal ratio, so I put that in just so I can just check my bass to vocal intensity levels. So references, again, it doesn't have to be like, it has to be exactly like this whole song. You can use it for whatever purpose. And I did this in like 5 seconds because, again, I have that knowledge of listening to all those albums before. So listen to music a lot and often. Okay, back to the actual process. The first thing I kind of do on this is I actually slap on a limiter. A limiter, if you don't know, we will explain later, but it will stop these peaks from going into the red, clipping, so that, when something clips, let's say online, it's going to come off as a like a distortion sound, and that ain't good. So we're going to stop that with something called a limiter, which is basically an extremist compressor. And it's like putting a brick wall or a ceiling for the peaks to stop going to like a distortion territory. And you'll see here that I put one at negative 0.20 dB, if that makes any difference to y'all. There's tons of really good information out there on limiters, so if you want, we can discuss later. Okay, I think next what I would usually do is I heard this track and I'm like, do you know what? Should I play the finished track? No, I'll finish the track later. I put a compressor on, and so yeah, this is a Shadow Hills industry. And again, it's another analog emulation. And oh, got it, sorry. I've been told that the audio track is a bit loud. Let me bring that sucker down. Cool. Okay. So, sorry about that, guys, if I blasted your ears. We have a compressor. Yes. Analog compressor. I think my goal for this was to cohere things together so it breathes together again, and also use it as a way to up my gain. I think the first thing that I always notice with mixes is they're too soft, because I know this is going to be for online distribution. And so we'll talk about this later if you guys have questions, but I'm just using a discrete compressor here. There's an optical and a discrete compressor in the Shadow Hills thing. I'm using a discrete compressor. There's some character I can impart on it, like nickel, iron, and steel. That just refers to output transformers. Again, if you have questions, I'll answer them later. So I'm putting a little bit of coloration as well, is what I'm saying, with this compressor, as well as using it to up my gain and reducing the dynamic range, as we discussed before. We won't go into this. I think the next thing I did was I put a multiband compressor on here. Basically, multiband compressor is you can now put a compressor but target it to a specific range of frequencies. Very useful. I use it a lot in mastering. You don't have to use it. Get to know how to use a compressor first, like a singular compressor, and then attack the multi-band. Just because, again, some dude on YouTube says you have to use it, don't like just figure out what works for you first, and then do it, because this can be dangerous as well. I've seen so many people mess up their bass end and completely miff a song and then publish it, unfortunately, with the multi-band. And I'm just like, oh, like, you should just taken off the multi-band. It sounded better as, the mix version. So just be careful again when you use compression. And then I had an EQ on here. There's something I did called MS processing. Again, for those of you who are more intermediate and advanced, mastering, I use a lot of something called mid-side processing. It's very useful, especially with respect to stereo width and stuff like that. This EQ, I'm putting a low-pass filter, sorry, a high-pass filter and a high-pass filter on here, because I'm getting rid of any frequencies that we can't even hear as humans, because that frees up energy and therefore gives me more headroom. That is a technique that's used a lot on mixed buses and in mastering. I'm also doing this in mind that I know that this is also going to vinyl. Okay, so mastering for vinyl is different. How you treat bass is different. We're not going to cover it here. Again, I can't teach everything, and I'm way over time, I think, so I apologize. I'll quickly go over the rest. So let's see. Again, I would play you after each change, but mastering is such a subtle difference that you probably won't hear it until all these little differences are, accumulative, and then you're like, whoa. So it's actually really deceiving. When you make a tiny change, you're like, oh, that doesn't matter. It does matter, because all these tiny little changes, suddenly you get this stellar track, and it's the most satisfying thing ever, as if you're like this, devious mastermind that was planning this all from the start. But usually it happens, unexpectedly sometimes. I'm putting a saturator on here. This is a tape emulator, one of my favorites. I usually, I'm skeptical with a lot of like digital saturators. I'm an analog type gal, but this one is excellent. ATR 102. It's cool. It's fun. You get to play with things like wow and flutter and noise and tape length, and without the hassle of an expensive tape machine that you'd have to fix every month for thousands and thousands of dollars. Okay, so usually what happens is, I'm doing my compressor, I do my EQs, and I do a saturator, and then the saturator always brings out some harmonics that I'm not too fond of, because that's what saturators do, and I kind of want to tame it. So I'll go in and I'll get really, really subtle with my EQs. you do probably have to, I mean, if you can hear the differences at first, that's awesome. But you really have to listen. A lot of people can't hear these changes at first, I think. And that's normal. But like I said, the more you practice, the more you hone yourself to become a robot frequency analyzer, it just comes naturally. And then that analog EQ is restrictive in like what frequencies you can choose from. And so I'm like, we're almost there, but there's just some frequencies I hear that I want to clean up. And so I get a parametric EQ out so I can hit exactly, 246 at -1 dB. And like, this is when, people are like, Sarah, you're insane in terms of like, it's all in your head. And you're like, is it? Maybe. But it made a difference for me. I thought it cleared up things like the muddy, mid-range there. My strokes are really small, 0.5 dB, -0.3 dB, 0.5 dB. You do have to practice to hear those differences, but they exist. They make the difference. So let's just quickly hear this track and then the mastered track. Okay, here we go.
I've been desperate and down,
Actually, let's choose a different section maybe here.
but I agree. Loving so blindly.
Too loud, eh? Is that what's happening? The master track is always a lot louder, so let me bring it down to the same level as the original. Okay, actually, let's do the print instead. Let's do this. Let's level match it first, so it's a fair comparison.
Loving so blindly.
That's still louder. One sec. One sec here. Yeah, so whatever, close enough. You need to match the levels of loudness to compare it fairly, because your ears will always be like, the louder one's better, and it's not necessarily. So to see if a change is making a difference, I always bring the original track to the same level as my changed track.
Loving so blindly.
But I think even on Zoom, you should be able to hear, the master track is much clearer, it's brighter, it's more defined. And so, yeah, that's basically how I mastered that. And I use a similar approach for the rest of that album, because I want the album to be consistent. So I know I want to use those same types of compressors and EQs to have the same coloration and things like that. Okay, I think that's it. I'm so sorry. Let me stop this share. And how much overtime am I doing? Whew, okay. Sorry about that, guys. We did start late, so I'm not that bad. Questions? Are there questions?
Yeah, just put one in the chat.
Oh, okay, cool. I see. Around what volume would you recommend the finished product to sit? I forgot to go through that. Often end up with a low volume mix, like you said. Okay, yeah. There's a lot of information there on loudness as a thing. Let me show you. Let me bring up the Pro Tools again. This will help y'all. Could I disable the originals? Yeah, I will. Okay. Let me bring that up. One sec. Okay. So what I forgot to bring up was meters. Sorry, guys. I forgot something when I was rushing. Okay. We have loudness meters. Just use the stock one. They're all the same, but Insight shows some cool stuff, so let's use that. That's not Insight. This is Insight. Okay. Generally, there's no hard set rule to loudness. What is good is if you find a published song, like I did, the the Joni Mitchell Court and Spark and all that stuff. What I sometimes do is I match my loudness of the original to that first, and then I start manipulating things, because that is a published song. But there are a few rules, in that these streaming services have their own compression algorithms, which really like to mess up with our hard work refined compression, because their compression algorithms are nasty and it makes things sound bad. So I generally want to have a loudness level where they don't have to compress, is my goal. If I provide the streaming services with a track at the right loudness level, then that's less interference from them, because theirs is just, a very unsophisticated, non-musical compression algorithm. So this is a cool little plugin. You don't need it. I've never really used it too much before, but I sometimes like to use it in case, just as a fun check. But honestly, if you're a good master, then you don't really need to. But this simulates what your music will sound like if it's like through Apple Music, through Spotify, through Tidal, through YouTube, Deezer and stuff. And like even if you have like the premium Spotify versus the free versus the mobile, basically it has the target loudness levels here. So we're going to explain something called LUF, which is a type of meter for loudness levels. We just call LUFs. There's a lot of acronyms. You can all look it up later. But we measure loudness in LUFs. And so Spotify has a target of minus 14 LUFs. If I'm playing this Sarah Harmer song,
I'm shameless, sinful, and aimless.
you'll see that this meter is showing the LUFs. It's just much too low because I turned it down for the zoom. But generally, this integrated LUFs is the average overall LUFs of the song. And generally, I hit negative 14 because I know it's going on Spotify, right? Short term, not always, and it doesn't have to be exactly negative 14, it's just generally. Short term just refers to like a more momentary one. Oh, and this is the more, so this is like a shorter average. This is over the whole like time you've played it. And I think short term is actually instantaneous LUFs. Yeah, that's going in real time. So again, it's really important though to know that these are just numbers and they don't necessarily correlate to perceived loudness. Again, this is where you have to understand that sound is psychological. So something can sound loud and actually have a lower LUFs. So be aware of that, because loudness can be perceived from, if you ever heard of like Whitney Houston bailing it, but you have her on low, it still sounds loud. Like you can tell she's bailing it, right? That's perceived loudness. So just be aware of that. Again, the numbers are just a check. I usually mix and master before I even check my meters. And I'm like, oh, I hit it spot on, because my ears are the best judgment. And you'll find that I didn't even need practice for that. Like I was hitting these numbers when I first started mixing, and you will too. It's just very natural for a human to hit the right loudness amounts if you have a calibrated listening environment. So for a mix, I think generally if you're doing pop or anything but classical or jazz, I think it's safe to be in the minus 20 to minus 16 area for a mix. Minus 24 to minus 16 area. Broadcast TV and music videos and all that stuff, that's at minus 24. And I actually kind of like it when it's around minus 18. That's just me preferably. But, it depends. Like, these are just numbers I'm throwing in. Again, not hard set rules. It will depend case by case. This is why I always have to put the disclaimer. It depends. It really just depends on your particular music, what instruments there are, how loud and soft you're going. So these are not hard rules. Generally, when I'm mastering, depending for what platform, I cannot give like vinyl necessarily a minus 14. That's ridiculous. So it's like, it's, if I'm doing online distribution, which I think most of you guys are, minus 14, which is Spotify's, is okay to hit. Apple is minus 16, Tidal is minus 13, YouTube is minus 14, Deezer is minus 15. They're all around the same area. It's okay to just aim for a target of -14 loudness average. Yeah, I think that's the most I can do. Again, just use what's really good is if you take a song that's already been published, use that as a reference. Use your ears first to check, then check with the meter. That's just my recommendation for that. I hope that helps. Okay, cool. Let me stop the share again. Any other questions? What would be the best drum miking with 2 overhead mics, 1 kick, and 1 snare to get an indie rock sound? You want me to start a fight on YouTube? This is what's going to happen. There is no best drum miking, honestly. Everyone's very. There's a lot of old angry men out there from the 70s who will slay you depending on your answer for this. With record, honestly, it sounds like a shitty like cop out of an answer, but with recording, again, using your ears is the best check. Best drum miking with 2 overhead mics, a kick, and a snare mic. I'll just tell you what I like to do. It's been a while since I've been limited with that many mics. 1 kick and 1 snare. Depending on the kick, it really depends on the kick. For where the kick mic goes. It could be in or out in the kick itself. It just depends on the kick. I have to hear it. Like I was surprised the last jazz kick I was recording, it sounded way better a foot away than it did inside, which was not intuitive to me. And the snare is pretty easy to get. It's just like, an inch away from the rim, pointing near to the sweet spot on the snare. It's the overhead mics that are going to be tricky. It is a physics thing a little bit. Like you have to kind of understand where I like to be equidistant from a kick snare axis. Actually, this was like a George Massenburg, philosophy. That's where I learned it from. And basically, if you imagine the kick and snare in the center, and so you treat where they hit the kick and snare, the drummer hits the kick and snare, and you go equidistant from that axis. Because when I'm mixing, the kick and snare are kind of going to be in the center, right? Because you want them to be the backbone of your groove, and then you kind of, as long as they're equidistant, and then you kind of choose like, do I want, and depends on the mic too, if it's a ribbon mic or not, how high and low you go. Do I want to be more over the toms? Do I want to be more over the crash? But it is important for phase issues that you're kind of equidistant. It'll make mixing easier for you. Honestly, I place overhead sometimes like 5 times before I get it right. That is a tricky one. So it's just a lot of experimentation. Some people like, what is it called? The John Glenn method. And, there's all these different methods out there. Look them up. I love just trying a new method each time. I love learning a new technique, a new sound. People all have different opinions. Again, there's no right or wrong. It depends what sound you're going for, right? So that's like saying like, what's the best genre of music? And, so it is a very subjective answer. Yeah. Is there any other questions? I think there was one before, Sarah. You said EQ before compression or after. Is that a question you had?
Yeah, that was one.
What do you mean, on a mix or on in general in mastering, or?
I think that was during the mixing session.
Okay. There's no rule. It depends what you want to do. Generally, I just go with what I hear is wrong first on a track. If I'm like, damn, that's some resonance, I'm gonna put an EQ on there. Or if I hear, oh, I need to reduce the dynamic range. Generally, after I reduce the dynamic range, something will pop out. I'm like, okay, now I have to add an EQ afterwards to deal with what happened after I process. I think it's simplest to think linearly and step after step so you don't get confused. That's how I like to work. I was gonna say, I'm a basic biatch, but like, it's basically how I mix. I'm like, what's wrong with it? Let's fix it. Yeah. There's no rule. It's just what you think needs to be done and in sequence. So that's it. basically. I think some people have old ways from their recording in the studio days too. And I think when you were stuck on a console, you were stuck with how that console was electrically routed. They're like, we have, an EQ, and then you route post to a compressor or something. So they were stuck with what that 80s or 90s console have, but we're not necessarily stuck with that now. So I like to have the no rules rule. And yeah. But some guys will, they will have opinions on that. They're like, no, it should be EQ and then compressor on every track, or vice versa. And they'll give you their reasons. And I mean, like, if that's how you like to record and mix, and that's legitimate, anything's game. But that's my approach.
And for mastering, is there a sequence that you use for mastering?
There's unfortunately, as much as we would like to have like I mean, but that's why it's an art. There is no set, this is what you will do, and it will guarantee you the most raw track, It's like painting. There are methods for things, but there's no guarantee that this is the best pop single if I do this sequence. It's very case by case, and that's why it's confusing, because it's a very technical art, but the choices you're making are artistic. So because they're subjective artistic choices, there's no like objective method, if that makes sense. And yeah, so that's how I view it.
Estella Ramirez says, I appreciate Sarah's approach, being both deeply knowledgeable and creatively flexible.
Oh, thank you.
Technical art.
Yeah, well, I think, we don't view it, but I think most art is like this. We just don't recognize it in that way. And I mean, like, it does get down to a philosophical debate about it, but yeah, it is I think, playing an instrument is very technical, and we don't see it that way sometimes. Like, oh, they're so artistic, but like, it's very technical. You have to practice all those crazy finger moves and stuff like that. So, yeah. Anything else?
Someone at Fee-Fi Folk Fum is on YouTube says, and here I was hoping to get the instant hit recipe.
Oh, yeah. Someone says they have that. It's a scam. It's a scam. I wish. No, that would make my life easier. And then, yeah, no, there's none. And that's why I say, like, you can use presets and stuff as a starting point if you're like in a rush, and then tweak things. But honestly, I'm a firm believer of, like, if you just kind of do it yourself, it's painful, I know, at first, and go through it. I swear it gets easier, and it's way more rewarding at the end of just playing, like, you intentionally got what you wanted, as if applying a black box process to your work. If you spent so much time and care and intention on writing that song, why would you throw it to the wind in the other stages because it seems technically difficult? It's really not as difficult as it looks. I know all the knobs are like scary and intimidating sometimes, because you're just like, why are there so many knobs, and like, which one do I turn? But if you just kind of like breathe in a few times and look at the label below it, you're like, okay, we discussed this, it looks like this. If it's a label that you have no freaking clue, then just like, you guys have Google. You guys are lucky, not to sound old, but like, back in my day. But like, yeah, so there's lots of great resources out there. I'm not that old. I also had Google, but yeah. I like to complain like I'm old, because sometimes I feel it. Yeah. Anything else?
No, that's about it. Thank you very much. This has been awesome.
Okay, great. Again, I will have this. I will put the PowerPoint up on my website. Give me a day. I don't think I remember my passwords and how to change the site, but we will figure this out. Again,
do some password recovery and
oh man,
yeah, oh man,
like the bane of my existence.
21st century woes.
For sure.
Thank you. This has been really great, and people on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook have been really enjoying this. They say thank you, Sarah. Great information. Thank you for the wonderful session. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
can't see your guys' messages, but thank you. And you know, if you love music, just just go out and do it. Everyone's inherently musical. Anyone can do this stuff. You don't need to be any special wizard or anything. You just need God-given patience, actually. That's it. But yeah.
Amen. Well, yes, praise music. At time, yeah, thank you very much. And good luck this week. It's the first week of the RPM, and a lot of people are like just getting started, or maybe the discouragement hasn't hit yet, but uh, don't worry, it's a natural process. Just work through it, keep going right there. You're doing great. And yeah, thanks again, Sarah, and thanks again, Sarah Harris, for coordinating this.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. I hope everyone has fun with their project.
Yeah, really nice to meet you. Okay, have a good night.
Bye.